Welcome back to the deep dive, the place where we take these, really complex organizations, dense reports, sprawling histories, and we distill them into the essential knowledge you need to be truly well-informed.
Hmm.
Today, we're peeling back the layers on CMS Energy, a massive entity that, in many ways, literally built the infrastructure backbone of an entire state, Michigan.
And we have a phenomenal stack of sources for this one. I mean, truly. We're looking at everything from, the original blueprints of these pioneering technological achievements back in the early 1900s, all the way to modern-day integrated resource plans.
Financial data, corporate scrutiny.
Intense corporate scrutiny, yeah. It's the perfect blend, really, for the learner who wants to understand not just what a major utility does today, but why its history sort of dictates its current climate mandates and financial maneuvers.
Our mission today it's pretty comprehensive. We want to unpack this major U.S. utility company, tracing its history from its surprisingly distant founding 139 years ago. I mean, back when electric power was a novelty.
Total novelty.
Right up to their massive modern commitments to wind, solar, and grid storage. And I think the core tension we're exploring is how a company that was built on pioneering tech and public service navigates the 21st century demands of, a clean energy transition and intense corporate accountability.
And that tension it's just fundamental because of the sheer scale we're talking about. CMS Energy is a holding company, and its primary focus is utility operations in Michigan, and that's through its principal subsidiary, Consumers Energy.
And this isn't a niche player.
Not at all. Our sources confirm that Consumers Energy serves over 6 million of the state's 10 million residents. That is a truly phenomenal reach and responsibility.
When you realize that two-thirds of the population of Michigan is dependent on the reliability, the affordability, the sustainability of this one entity, the context just shifts entirely.
It does.
It's not just a business anymore, it's a public trust.
And what's fascinating here is just the sheer administrative, financial, and physical scale involved in maintaining that kind of public necessity, while simultaneously transitioning away from the very power sources that sustain them for a century.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the modern scale and structure, the who and how big. So let's establish that modern identity first. We're talking about the CMS Energy Corporation. It's a publicly traded company on the NYSE, part of the S&P 500, headquartered in Jackson, Michigan at One Energy Plaza. When investors look at CMS, what are they primarily buying into?
They are buying into stability. I mean, primarily it's due to the regulated nature of the utility business. CMS Energy is the parent company, dealing in two absolutely essential products, electricity and natural gas.
Right.
But as you said, the core operational engine is Consumers Energy, the principal subsidiary that has operated since 1886. And the fact that it is a regulated utility, that is the single most important financial detail to grasp.
That concept regulated utility is so crucial for our learner audience. Can you break that down? What does that regulatory environment actually mean for a company of this size?
It means they operate under what's often called the regulatory compact. So in short, the government grants Consumers Energy a monopoly over a specific service territory. In this case, serving those 6 million Michigan residents.
Okay, so they have a guaranteed customer base.
A guaranteed monopoly. And in exchange for that, the utility agrees to deliver reliable, safe service and, critically, their profits and the rates they can charge customers are strictly overseen and approved by the Michigan Public Service Commission.
So they're guaranteed a certain rate of return, but only if they invest in the infrastructure and maintain reliability. They can't just hike rates whenever they want.
Exactly. They generate revenue based on their approved rate base, which is really just the total value of the physical assets they've invested in and that are deemed useful to customers.
So we're talking power plants, transmission lines.
Power plants, transmission lines, smart meters, you name it. And that financial structure explains why utilities, unlike, say, tech companies, often have these massive asset valuations but relatively stable, predictable income streams.
Let's use the actual 2024 financial data we have to kind of contextualize this massive scale. What does this look like on the balance sheet?
Well, looking at the 2024 snapshot, the company reported revenue standing at U.S. $7.52 billion.
$7.5 billion.
From that, they achieved an operating income of U.S. $1.49 billion, and that then translated into a net income of an even U.S. $1 billion.
Hitting that billion-dollar net income mark, That gives a really clear sense of the financial weight they carry. But when we look at the total assets, that rate base you mentioned, that figure is just immense.
It is. Total assets stood at US $35.9 billion in 2024. And this isn't cash flow. This is physical infrastructure.
Right.
It represents the value of their entire system. Natural gas pipelines stretching across the state, massive underground storage facilities, the remaining coal fleet, nuclear decommissioning funds, and of course all the new wind and solar farms. It is the physical spine of the state's energy infrastructure.
All managed by, what was it, about 8,300 employees?
8,324 employees, yeah.
That $35.9 billion asset valuation really drives home that idea of the public trust they hold. I mean, maintaining and upgrading that enormous physical network is just an endless job, especially during a massive transition like this.
It is. And this necessity for constant investment and upgrade, it brings us to the increasingly crucial non-utility arm of the company, which provides a really key strategic outlet for growth outside of that regulated environment.
And this is the part of the company that went through a major pivot and rebranding recently, moving away from what used to be called CMS Enterprises.
Yes, the creation and focus on NorthStar Clean Energy. On November 1st, 2022, CMS Enterprises officially changed its name. And the sources are pretty clear that this was done to signal a very specific strategic intent.
Which was?
To reflect its focus on serving more corporate clients, so think major data centers or large manufacturers who have their own sustainability mandates, and engaging in domestic independent power production and natural gas projects that are not tied to the Michigan rate base.
That's such a critical distinction. Consumers Energy has to serve every resident in its territory at regulated rates. NorthStar, on the other hand, can go out and seek higher margin specialized projects globally or domestically.
Exactly. Dealing directly with big corporate customers who need, for example, power purchase agreements for new solar farms.
Right.
NorthStar allows CMS Energy to pursue competitive market growth. If a large corporation in an estate wants a custom-built solar array to offset its carbon footprint, NorthStar can design, finance, and operate that asset. That's growth the regulated utility simply cannot achieve, since Consumers Energy's mandate is so strictly tied to serving Michigan ratepayers.
So this non-regulated arm offers higher growth potential, and that sort of balances the stability of the regulated side. That's the idea. So the structure is actually pretty sophisticated. You've got a stable, regulated foundation in Consumers Energy, providing essential services and steady returns, while this high-growth, competitive market arm, NorthStar Clean Energy, seeks out new opportunities in the rapidly expanding clean energy space.
That's the modern picture, yeah. Deeply entrenched in Michigan utility service, but with a very clear strategic pivot toward high-growth, non-utility clean energy. But we can't really appreciate the complexity of today without understanding the origin story. We have to go back to a time when electric power itself was still a wild new frontier.
And here's where we see the origins of that pioneering spirit. So the story of this massive corporation begins not with multi-billion-dollar asset valuations or international corporate clients, but with a very simple, very localized ambition back in 1886.
It truly started from a local entrepreneurial need. The foundational moment was when two men, William Augustine Foote and Samuel Jarvis, approached officials in Jackson, Michigan, and their proposal was simple: illuminate Jackson's downtown area with electric arc lights.
Downtown illumination, I mean, that's a major technological upgrade from gaslight for sure, but it's certainly not a regional power grid.
Not even close. Their initial efforts led to the formation of the Jackson Electric Light Works in 1888. But Foote and Jarvis, they understood the core challenge of early electrification. Power has to be generated, and then it has to be distributed. So they quickly moved to secure reliable generation.
Which in Michigan meant tapping into the rivers.
Exactly, hydropower. Their first major step into generation really defined their early strategy.
And what was that?
It was just a year after forming the Jackson Electric Light Works. In 1889, they built an early hydro plant project at the Trowbridge Dam on the Kalamazoo River in Allegan. But crucially, Foote recognized that the future wasn't just in running one small plant, it was in connecting many small plants.
So he immediately shifted into consolidation mode.
Immediately. Foote began rapidly consolidating small power companies all across the region, acquiring local competitors, centralizing their operations. And this strategy eventually led to the formation of the Commonwealth Power Company. This foresight moving from a local light works to a regional power company was it was revolutionary at the time.
In this early focus on hydro and consolidation, it led to what I would call a genuinely world-changing aha moment for the energy industry globally, and it originated right here with this company's founders.
This is the moment to remember. The Croton Hydro Project on the Muskegon River, which Foote and Jarvis built in 1907, it wasn't just about more generating capacity, it was about transmission technology.
Okay, tell us why the Croton project was such a global milestone. What was the technological barrier they smashed through?
The crucial detail is that the Croton Hydro Project was the first project in the world capable of transmitting 110,000 volts of electricity.
110,000 volts.
Before this, transmitting power over long distances was just incredibly inefficient due to energy loss. It forced cities to rely on local, often very polluting power generation.
110 kilovolts, 110 kiloV. Explain the strategic implication of that specific number. Why did it matter so much?
Well, it allowed for the commercial birth of the modern centralized utility model. Before 110 kV, you couldn't efficiently power a distant city from a large-scale, cost-effective hydro plant. The moment Foote perfected 110 kV transmission, he instantly gained a massive competitive advantage.
He could build big plants anywhere.
He could build massive power stations in remote, cheap locations like on the Croton River, and then efficiently transmit that power up to 100 miles away to major consumption centers like Grand Rapids or Jackson.
It just fundamentally shifted the economics of power. So it wasn't just a technical upgrade. It enabled the financial strategy of the modern utility building large, efficient, centralized plants and delivering power across these vast service territories.
You got it. It was the birth of the energy monopoly, really, built on technological superiority.
So this is the strategic insight then. Foote's company wasn't just building dams. They were pioneering the technology that allowed for the regional integrated power grid itself. And that vision laid the groundwork for their position as the dominant utility in Michigan.
It absolutely did.
But that kind of rapid high capital expansion, driven by that technological leadership, it requires equally massive amounts of capital. Which brings us to the next pivotal moment in 1920.
Right. By 1920, to finance not just operational maintenance, but the aggressive expansion into other energy and power generation sectors, which utilities constantly require, Foote and Jarvis offered preferred shares of the Commonwealth Power Company to the public.
So this was the moment they formalized that transition from a pioneering regional infrastructure builder into a publicly financed corporate entity ready to tackle the immense industrial growth of the 20th century.
Precisely. They started with basic arc lights, conquered hydropower, established a global first in high-voltage transmission, and then by 1920, they were publicly capitalized. That set the stage for decades of large-scale asset accumulation.
Which brings us directly into the period where they had to diversify beyond just hydro and early fossil fuels. The mid-20th century brought new challenges. I mean, the explosive growth of industry and population required immense, consistent baseload power, and that led this company, like many others, straight into the nuclear era.
The pivot was. It was decisive. In 1961, Consumers Energy announced plans for Michigan's very first nuclear power plant, Big Rock Point, located up in Charlevoix.
A huge step.
It was a clear strategic shift toward embracing what was, at the time, the most advanced form of baseload power generation available. It really signified their commitment to keeping pace with surging industrial demand.
And Big Rock Point was followed by an even larger commitment to nuclear power about a decade later, right?
Correct. We also had the Palisades Nuclear Generating Station, which is situated right on Lake Michigan. This facility was a major asset. It began production in December of 1971.
And it was a workhorse.
Oh, absolutely. At its peak, it was designed to serve the daily needs of about 400,000 people. It was a real linchpin of their generation portfolio for decades, and it demonstrated the necessity of having diverse power sources to manage that statewide demand.
And as we mentioned earlier, the postscript on Palisades is important because it shows the ongoing management of these massive assets.
Yeah, CMS Energy owned the Palisades plant until 2006 when they sold it to Energy. And selling a major generation asset like a nuclear plant, that's a significant corporate decision. It's usually tied to risk management, regulatory costs, or a strategic refocusing on other forms of generation.
Which sort of foreshadows the later transition away from centralized baseload.
It does. Now, alongside these massive nuclear investments, they were also innovating heavily in natural gas, which is, vital for residential heating and industrial use in a cold state like Michigan. This often gets overshadowed by the big power plants.
It's easy to forget about the gas side.
It is, but their natural gas strategy has been incredibly resilient. A key innovation happened way back in 1946 when the company formed a strategic partnership with the Panhandle Company. And they had this genius idea of converting former natural gas fields, which are essentially just large underground geological formations, into massive underground natural gas storage areas.
That's a brilliant way to stabilize supply in a market with such seasonal demand.
It's crucial for resilience. I mean, Michigan's gas demand peaks violently in the winter, so by storing massive volumes of gas during the summer, when demand is low and prices are cheaper, they can ensure continuous, affordable supply during those cold snaps.
It's basically a hedge against market volatility and supply chain shocks.
That's exactly what it is. And then in the 1970s, they took gas innovation one step further, almost becoming a petroleum manufacturer themselves.
This is the truly surprising piece of their history.
It really is. In 1971, the company announced plans for a synthetic gas reforming plant. And the whole point was to ensure heat for Michigan homes, regardless of, external oil and gas politics.
So what was the technical marvel here?
Our sources are explicit. This plant was the first of its kind in North America to produce pipeline-quality synthetic gas. And they did this by chemically converting impure liquid petroleum, which is generally easier to source and transport than natural gas, into usable, high-grade synthetic gas.
The kind you could just pipe directly to homes?
The kind suitable for residential pipelines, yeah. So they were not just transporting and storing gas, they were actively pioneering the technology to manufacture a key energy source on a massive commercial scale in the early 1970s. It just highlights this deep, ongoing corporate commitment to energy security and technological independence.
It shows a consistent pattern, doesn't it? When they're faced with a structural challenge, whether it's long-distance transmission in 1907 or securing fuel in 1971, they just lean into pioneering technical solutions.
Every time. And this era of diversification and massive asset growth, it necessitated a corporate overhaul, which led to the creation of the current holding company structure we see today.
And that was formalized in 1987.
That's right. CMS Energy was formed as the parent company. It absorbed the utility business, which was then called Consumers Power, and the diversified non-utility investment arm, CMS Enterprises. And this reorganization was instrumental in managing the complexity of all these diverse assets, from nuclear plants to synthetic gas producers.
And they officially became CMS Energy, publicly traded later that year.
October 23, 1987, CMS Energy officially became a publicly owned company listed on the NYSE. And then a decade later, in 1997, they finalized the branding by changing the subsidiary name from Consumers Power to Consumers Energy, the name that has 6 million customers today.
It's important to remember, too, that as the physical assets grew, so did the digital needs. They were also technological pioneers in the customer service space.
They really were. The late 1990s saw the firm become one of the first utility companies to introduce an online billing system. I know that sounds mundane today, but back then, managing millions of accounts online was a major logistical and IT achievement. It further cemented their role as an infrastructure leader, both physical and digital.
And finally, we see those brief but interesting diversions in the early 2000s, where they kind of explored opportunities outside their core mission before refocusing.
Yeah, the sources show they cast a pretty wide net for a while. An oil exploration agreement in 2001 for the Disman block of the Red Sea in Eritrea.
Wow.
And the founding of Interbank USA in 2002, moving into the financial sector by providing home improvement loans.
But these non-core assets were eventually shed, right?
They were. The oil exploration was transient, and the financial venture, Interbank USA, was successfully sold to Regions Bank in 2021. And this cycle of acquisition, management, and strategic divestment it's typical of large corporations, but it clearly indicates a strategic narrowing and refocusing on the core utility mission and the clean energy transition.
Which is our next and perhaps most critical area of focus. So if the 20th century was about building centralized power, hydro, nuclear, coal, the modern era is defined by this massive, intentional, and very expensive pivot toward decentralized renewables and sustainability. And this started with a major statement of intent.
It did. The year 2007 is pivotal here. CMS Energy announced plans to invest a staggering $6 billion in Michigan's energy future. This wasn't just a promise. This was a signal to regulators, to shareholders, and to the public that they were committing generational capital to support new power plant technology and identify new, cleaner energy sources.
$6 billion is not a small investment, even for a utility with, $35 billion in assets? What were the primary drivers for that colossal pledge?
It was multifaceted, but fundamentally driven by two things: regulatory pressure to reduce carbon emissions and the aging, expensive maintenance required for their existing coal fleet. That capital pledge was necessary to proactively transition away from coal generation, replace that capacity with renewables, and harden the grid infrastructure.
And the most immediate, tangible result of that pledge was a significant expansion into utility-scale wind power.
That's right. The sources really highlight the Crosswinds Energy Park, which Consumers Energy opened in 2014 in Tuscola County, Michigan. This is a clear demonstration of their capital at work.
It was big.
It had a substantial total generating capacity of 105 megawatts, utilizing 62. I think it was 1.79 kilowatt wind turbine engines supplied by GE.
That's real scale. And by 2015, they were already seeing a measurable shift in their overall energy mix.
Indeed. By 2015, a verifiable 9% of CMS Energy's total power generation came from renewable energy sources. And to give that some context, while 9% might sound small, for a company that had relied on coal and nuclear for decades, that rapid shift represented a massive internal commitment and engineering effort to integrate these intermittent sources into a reliable grid.
But the shift didn't stop at wind. The real depth of their modern commitment is reflected in their Integrated Resource Plan, the IRP. This is basically the playbook for the future of the utility.
The IRP is absolutely essential context for any learner looking at a modern utility. It's a 20-year roadmap that a regulated utility submits to state regulators, detailing how they plan to meet forecasted energy demand affordably and reliably, while also meeting clean energy mandates. And CMS Energy's IRP it's incredibly aggressive.
Aggressive in what way? What are their key targets for the next couple of decades?
Well, their plan centers on completely retiring their remaining coal plants, which, remember, were the workhorses of their 20th century portfolio by 2025.
That's soon.
By 2025. That is a massive undertaking, and it necessitates a colossal influx of new clean generation. To that end, they're targeting the addition of over 8,000 megawatts of solar power by 2040.
8,000 megawatts of solar. That's a monumental build-out. What does that require in terms of land, connection, and, most importantly, storage?
It requires immense land acquisition and planning, but you hit on it. Storage is the true technical challenge. Solar and wind are intermittent, right?
Right.
They only generate when the sun shines or the wind blows.
Right.
So to maintain reliability after retiring reliable 2047 coal and nuclear plants, you need sophisticated storage solutions. And the IRP calls for significant investment in battery energy storage systems, aiming to deploy thousands of megawatts of storage capacity.
So that $6 billion investment announced back in 2007 wasn't just for a few wind farms. It was really the down payment on replacing nearly a century of fossil fuel infrastructure with a completely new, distributed, and digitized grid that can handle intermittent power.
That is the ultimate strategic implication. And we have to connect this back to that dual corporate structure we talked about. Consumers Energy handles the bulk of this IRP mandate, building the solar, the storage, and the transmission upgrades that the 6 million Michigan residents need.
While NorthStar Clean Energy is capitalizing on the broader market trend.
Exactly. NorthStar targets the competitive clean energy market, which is also booming. They utilize the same internal expertise, designing, building, and operating large renewable facilities. But they offer those services commercially to large corporate clients who want clean energy without waiting for the regulated utility process.
Which allows CMS Energy to monetize the green transition on two distinct fronts.
Mandated public service and competitive growth.
Yeah. And this shift, it reflects a profound change in how they manage risk, doesn't it? They're moving away from these centralized, high-risk assets like nuclear and coal, which have massive decommissioning costs and environmental liabilities, toward more distributed, modular assets like solar and storage.
It's a very calculated move. I mean, decommissioning nuclear plants and managing coal ash sites are expensive, multi-decade burdens. By shifting capital toward wind and solar, they are investing in assets with lower operational environmental risk and often clearer regulatory paths for cost recovery through the rate base.
That's a modern business model focused so heavily on capital deployment for the green shift. But when a corporation is this expansive, this pioneering, and this deeply intertwined with public life, they are constantly under a spotlight. Which brings us to the necessary balance sheet, the awards, and the intense scrutiny.
When you manage an asset base of $35.9 billion in the public interest, every single dollar and every decision comes with a spotlight. And it's just essential to look at the full spectrum of their corporate performance, the successes and the criticisms, to understand their public identity.
So let's start with the recognition side, the accolades that show they are meeting their mandate for efficiency and reliability.
Their efforts in sustainability and efficiency have received major recognition. Consumers Energy was named Energy Star Partner of the Year for excellence in sustainable energy efficiency programs, and they got that award in both 2014 and 2015.
And that's important because it's not just about generating power cleanly, but about helping customers use less of it in the first place.
Precisely. That partnership with customers on efficiency directly reduces the need for the utility to build costly new power plants, which ultimately benefits ratepayers. Beyond that, they received major recognition on the financial front, which pleases shareholders.
Of course.
CMS Energy received the Edison Electric Institute's Index Award in 2014 for achieving the top cumulative shareholder return in the small cap category. This confirms they were successfully navigating this capital-intensive energy transition while still delivering sector-leading value to their investors.
And perhaps the most vital recognition they received relates to their core purpose, just keeping the grid running, especially during emergencies.
That speaks directly to the resilience mandate. They received the 2015 Emergency Recovery Award for their comprehensive electricity restoration efforts following that devastating December 2013 North American storm complex. And this showcases the fundamental expectation of a utility, the ability to respond rapidly, restore service, and manage a widespread crisis.
So moving beyond direct utility performance, they also show a deep commitment to environmental stewardship of the land they operate on, which is, it's crucial for utilities who own these vast tracts of property.
It is. By 2007, we find that all of their power facilities received the Clean Corporate Citizen Award from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. And this award demands really high standards for environmental compliance and pollution prevention.
So across all their sites.
All operational sites. They also actively join the Wildlife Habitat Council and receive compliance certificates for their robust environmental education programs.
So we have a company that's top tier in efficiency, highly reliable in a crisis, recognized for environmental stewardship, and they also maintain a significant philanthropic presence.
The philanthropic work is a core part of their social license to operate. They support numerous research, educational, and cultural institutes throughout Michigan. And most notably, they received the William Booth Award in 2013 from the Salvation Army, specifically recognizing their leadership in the People Care Assistance Program.
And the People Care Program is critical. It provides direct financial aid to vulnerable customers who struggle to pay for essential heat and electricity, so it's fulfilling a necessary social function. They also focus on building local talent.
Absolutely. They participate in extensive internship and cooperative education programs specifically designed to build career opportunities and retain talent within Michigan, linking their long-term workforce needs to local community development.
So this overwhelming positive corporate social responsibility profile, the awards, the recovery, the philanthropy, that's one narrative. However, as a large corporation operating under this regulatory compact, every financial decision is scrutinized through a critical lens. And we must now turn to the critical context provided by nonpartisan watchdog groups.
And this is where we bring in the findings from the nonpartisan organization Public Campaign. They were released in December 2011, and they focused on CMS Energy's financial strategies during the 2008 to 2010 period. And it offers essential context on that tension between shareholder maximization and public service.
Okay, and what did that report find concerning the company's spending on political influence relative to its tax burden?
Well, the organization highlighted a significant disparity. During that 2008-2010 period, CMS Energy was criticized for spending $3.48 million on lobbying Congress. But crucially, the criticism noted that during that same three-year window, the company was reported to have received $29 million in tax rebates.
That's a huge delta. So $3.48 million spent on lobbying, resulting in a net positive tax benefit of $29 million. And this occurred while they were clearly profitable.
That's the core of the criticism. The company was reporting substantial financial health, achieving a profit of $415 million during that 2008-2010 window. And the implication for the public is that the company was using sophisticated tax strategies and lobbying efforts to minimize its federal tax contributions, effectively receiving a subsidy, even while earning hundreds of millions in profit within a regulated low-risk market.
And this ties back directly to that regulatory compact. Since their guaranteed revenue comes from ratepayers, any financial maneuver that reduces their tax burden is viewed with intense scrutiny because it raises questions about how much of those tax savings are passed on to the customer versus the shareholder.
Precisely. And the criticism extended beyond just tax strategies and lobbying. It also focused sharply on executive compensation.
What were the findings regarding executive pay during that period?
The Public Campaign report highlighted that over that same 2008-2010 timeframe, The total compensation for the company's top 5 executives increased dramatically. It rose by a staggering 79%.
79%.
In 2010 alone, their total combined compensation reached $900.4 million.
A near 80% increase in executive compensation, coinciding with millions in tax rebates and substantial profits. I mean, this figure demands closer inspection because in a regulated industry, pay is often linked to performance metrics approved by regulators. But the scale of that increase is what drew the spotlight.
And this juxtaposition creates that necessary corporate tension we have to address. How does a massive public service provider balance these essential, highly praised public services, emergency recovery, environmental compliance, deep community aid, with aggressive internal goals of maximizing shareholder and executive value? Because both of those narratives are true, and both shape the modern identity of CMS Energy.
It just illustrates the tightrope walk that any major utility undertakes. They have to satisfy the government regulator demanding reliability and affordability, the customers demanding low rates and clean energy, and the shareholders demanding sector-leading returns and executive compensation that reflects success. It's a very difficult balance. What a profound and detailed look at a company that is often just seen as, the entity on a monthly bill. If we step back and summarize the key takeaways, we've tracked a company that started in 1886 focused on basic electric arc lights in Jackson.
And that founding spirit of innovation led them to become a global utility giant by pioneering technology. They were the first in the world to transmit electricity at 110 kilovolts at the Croton Dam in 1907. They successfully embraced every 20th century energy shift, from early nuclear power to developing sophisticated underground natural gas storage, even manufacturing synthetic gas in the 1970s.
And now, in the modern era, they've made this deliberate, massive commitment, that $6 billion pledge to the clean energy transition, and it's all codified in their integrated resource plan. This plan mandates the retirement of their entire coal fleet and the deployment of 8,000 megawatts of solar and thousands of megawatts of battery storage.
Right.
And meanwhile, they strategically use their non-regulated arm, NorthStar Clean Energy, to capture growth in the corporate clean energy market outside of Michigan.
And so the deep dive reveals this dynamic, constantly evolving utility that's navigating a minefield of conflicting pressures. They have to manage the necessity of public service connecting 6 million residents with reliable power while simultaneously directing immense capital toward these rapid technological shifts. And this pursuit of public good is constantly scrutinized by the financial realities of maximizing profit, which leads to that inevitable tension regarding lobbying and compensation structures versus ratepayer concerns.
It's the full, complex picture of a corporation that hasn't just shaped the physical landscape, but has driven technological innovation for over a century.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. We've seen CMS Energy's historical role as a pioneer in these foundational energy technologies. The 110 kV system, synthetic gas, early nuclear. Now, their massive financial and technical resources are committed to solar, wind, and basic battery storage. As the global energy landscape faces the next truly disruptive technology, whether that's widespread commercial hydrogen fuel cells, advanced high-capacity superconducting transmission, or the wide-scale deployment of small modular nuclear reactors, how swiftly and aggressively will the constant pressure of public utility needs compel companies like CMS Energy to pivot their billions in capital to embrace that next great technological leap?
The journey continues. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into CMS Energy. We'll see you next time.